Hey everyone, I'm Stephanie, host and head bookologist here at the Get Literate podcast. I'm a book loving, notebook hoarding reader and writer on a mission to change lives one book and one notebook at a time. On this podcast, we explore the power of bookology. What's that? That's the study of books and reading and notebooks and writing mixed with mindful practices and creativity to create lives we love. Here, you'll find episodes exploring the reading and writing life and how they can make our actual lives better. You'll get book recommendations and notebooking prompts around particular themes, and you'll even hear from authors and special guests who can fuel our reading and writing hearts and help us take inspired action in our own daily practices. So, grab a notebook and your TBR list, and let's get literate. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Get Literate podcast. I'm Stephanie, your host and bookologist, here with a bit of a head cold. I apologize if my voice is not exactly as it typically is, and if there are a few tiny pauses as I take a sip of the nice hot beverage I have next to me, keeping my voice going. But the show must go on. The episode is coming out, and I have a topic that I was really excited to share with you, mainly because I'm being selfish and I want your advice. So, if you've looked at the last couple of episodes that have released on the podcast, you can tell that I am getting the podcast into the holiday spirit. We have talked about holiday notebooks. We have talked about holiday books to put on your TBR, and even talked about gifts specifically for restorative reading and writing. But if I'm honest, in the month of December, I tend to go back and forth between filling my home with Christmas spirit and wanting to declutter it all and throw it all away. Can you relate? So I love the holidays and I love getting out the Christmas decorations and the multiple trees and the twinkly lights and all of the things. But it never fails. When I do, I am struck with a parallel feeling of, oh my gosh, we need to clean this house out and get it ready for the new year. Right? There's always times in the calendar when I feel a bit more of a pull to just redo everything in my home. Spring cleaning is one, and the holiday season is another because all the decorations are coming out. I know that new gifts are going to come in, and that means I need space. I don't just want to keep piling it or moving it or reorganizing. I want to clean it out. And so it never fails. I will go into the basement, into the back room, and get out the decorations and instantly feel like, oh man, I should have organized my decorations better last year before I threw them all in. But I remember throwing them all in next year saying, I'll organize that when I pull them all out next year. And in order to get them all out, you have to move things in the basement in order to drag them all out appropriately. And of course, that gets me thinking of how the basement should be cleaned up. And then if I take some things from the basement that perhaps belong in the shed, well, then the shed needs to be cleaned up. And then, of course, the garage needs to be cleaned up because there's all those outdoor lights that are out there. So I alternate between let's fill the house with Christmas spirit and let's get it all out of here. It doesn't help that recently I've also been clearing out the finished side of my basement as I created my reading, writing, yoga studio. So, if you've been listening, you know that I researched the health and wellness and creative benefits of bringing reading and writing into our daily lives. And as part of that research, I've been layering in yoga and mindfulness and meditation practices into that. I decided to get my 200-hour yoga teacher training, which I finished in October, and have been slowly dipping my toes into the waters of teaching classes. In December, I decided to just jump in the deep end and host a 24 days of bookish yoga challenge. Every day in December, 7:30 a.m., I go live on YouTube I share a festive book recommendation and a 20 to 30-minute yoga practice to help me practice and flex that muscle of teaching. It's one thing to do yoga on your own mat. It's another thing to do the yoga and talk out loud and look at the camera and not fall over and all the things. But it's been great fun. You can head to my YouTube channel, just type in Stephanie Affinito in YouTube or even 24 Days of Bookish Yoga, and that will bring you right to it. But in cleaning out that side of the basement, I've already been going through stuff. I've been going through my bins of things that I save. I've been going through my books and reorganizing my bookshelves and making new ones. I've been going through all of my notebook and craft supplies, my pens, my pencils, my sticker, my bling, all of that. And in doing all of that work, I have realized that I not only keep books everywhere, but I keep notebooks everywhere. Now, yes, some of those notebooks are brand new, waiting to be filled. And yes, some of those notebooks are completely full. They have been written in from top to bottom, left to right, and they're just here. When I started pulling them from all the different locations they were in, and I put them in one stack, I was actually pretty impressed with the amount of notebooks I have filled. Because here's the thing, I never saved my notebooks. It just never crossed my mind. I never saved them from when I was a kid, although I do have some random things here and there. I never saved them in my young adult life, and even up to a couple of years ago, I didn't save them. My personal notebooks, my work notebooks, my writing notebooks, none of them. It's almost like when I turned that last page and they were done, I just moved on. And I literally just tossed them in the garbage, did that with my hands, and off we go. And now I'm horrified. I am horrified that I did that because, I mean, come on. When you have a notebook and you have written in it from the beginning to the end and you have filled those pages, that is something to celebrate. Do you know how many minutes you must have spent in that writing as self-care practice? How many words you put on the page that help release emotion? How many minutes of hearing that pencil or that pen scratch across that paper and bring you into that meditative state? Those notebooks are evidence of self-care, evidence of healing, evidence of learning, evidence of wellness. And I used to just toss it in the garage. But looking at the stack of completed notebooks and knowing I could open them and just rifle through them and flip through them and see all of those hundreds of thousands of words, I knew I just couldn't do that anymore. I just couldn't toss them. I didn't want to part with them anymore, first of all, because now I knew what I was holding on to. Now I knew the evidence of writing practice, of wellness, of self-care, of all the things that I was holding on to, and I want to see it. I want to keep it visible. I want it as a reminder that I made this a priority on my life and I still can. I did these things for a reason, and look at me go. Look at all I have. So today, I want to talk to you about what to do with our used notebooks, not our old notebooks, right? Not just notebooks that you've had for a while that are completely brand new still, or notebooks that you filled halfway up. I'm not talking about those because we could do different things with those. I'm talking about your used notebooks where there really isn't any room to put anything else. What do you do? What do you do with them? I'm trying to decide what to do with my big, tall stack that I have. And I think when you decide, there's basically two broad options. You keep them or you don't, right? They either stay or they go. Now, it likely depends on the kind of notebook you have, right? If we're talking about a morning page notebooks with our deepest, darkest secrets, that's one thing. If we're talking about our professional notebooks that just have all of our meeting notes from the last year at work, that's a different thing. So depending on your notebook, you may have different ideas of what you want to do with those used notebooks. But today I want to talk about 4 options that I think we have. and 4 options that I'm going back and forth between that, of course, I want your feedback and I want your ideas around. So let me take a quick sip of coffee and keep going. So up first, I want to talk about our options if you are choosing to save your used filled notebooks. Now you might be thinking, why would I save it? Right? Maybe you were like me and you just were an automatic tosser. Well, you might want to save it because of what I just said earlier. It's an incredible reminder of the time you put in for your emotional health and your writing health and your wellness and or your creativity. It's such a good artifact of that time, but it's also a record. It's a record of your life. It's a roadmap of your emotions. It's a collection of your own writing. It could be lists upon lists upon lists of ideas that you've had and you've tried to follow through on. It could be filled with information that you might want to reread later and revisit that old version of yourself or unroll that process that you went through to get where you are today. And it also could be a legacy. Think about the future family members, the future generations, your kids, your grandkids, your great grandkids, and beyond, who might look at these notebooks and treasure them as a way to get to know you on the page that they might not have been able to do in real life. I think there are just so many reasons why we should keep our used notebooks. But the question then becomes, how? How do we do that? And so the first option I have for you is where my old used notebooks currently are housed. And that is you save them privately out of your family's eye. So think about gathering all of them together from all of the locations that they might be in your home, like I did, and simply stacking them up and hiding them. Just keeping them out of sight, right? You don't want to see the clutter. Maybe you don't want to have them out where people could just pick one up and flip through it, but you still want to keep them. So maybe you get a bin, you get a tote, right? You could get the nice, durable, tough plastic. You could get the ones that are not see-through, the ones that are colored so that people don't know your innermost secrets are in that bin. Or you could get one that is clear so that when you're browsing and you're stacking those boxes and you have it in storage, a quick look will remind you that those journals exist and they represent some really good self-care time and that they are there. But these bins also, they keep them private, they keep them out of your family's eye, but they also keep them safe and dry. A couple of years ago, gosh, maybe 10 years now, we had a small furnace fire and black soot just went everywhere, all the way up to the second floor of our home. So much was ruined because I wasn't a very good storer of things. I didn't have most of my treasured objects in bins with airtight seals, and a lot of it disappeared. So keeping one of those plastic, tough, durable totes and bins, it could keep your notebooks out of public eye, but also keep them safe and dry. Now, here's 2 things I recommend if this option is resonating with you. Number 1, label your notebooks, right? Label your notebooks. And what do I mean when I mean label? I mean, maybe you just take a Sharpie and you write on the cover, whatever kind of cover it is, or maybe you take a sticky note and you just adhere it down more with extra tape to keep it safe, and just label it with your name and the date. Stephanie Affinito's notebook ends December 2004. December 2004, 2024. Or Mom's notebook, 1998. When my kids love to have their hands on that notebook. The idea is just to very quickly, when you look at your pile of notebooks, if you're going in to look back on them for a certain reason, you need to be able to find where you want to go. And we can talk about if you should look back in your notebooks or if you shouldn't. We'll talk about that in a couple of minutes. But if you do, you want a quick way to identify them. And so just slapping something on the cover will do the trick. Now, the other thing I recommend is something I've never done, but I'm trying right now. And that is I am writing a letter to whoever happens to find my bin of notebooks so that they know this treasure that is inside. Now, I've joked before that inside my morning page notebook, there's a little sticky note that says stop. This is mom's private notebook, and I share lots of emotions and things. Proceed at your own risk because they're in there. They're in there. Everybody's in there. But I thought I would love to have a letter that's a bit more extended that says, hey, look what you found. You have found my collection of notebooks. Let me tell you just how important notebooking was for me. Let me tell you why I hope finding my notebook sparks you to start your own or keep your own practice going. Here's what's inside these pages. Here's what you might like to read, but here's what you might not, right? These pages were private and never shared, but I chose to save them because I thought it could be a legacy of someone who wanted to learn more about me, who didn't know me, but is still part of me. Right? You can write whatever you want to write in that letter, but I just think it would be so special to find that and have someone really see these used notebooks as your legacy. So there is option one, save your notebooks, but do so privately. Quick sip of coffee and then on to number two. Okay, here we go. Number two is to save your notebooks, but display them publicly. Now, I don't know, some of you may have just gotten an instant emotion coursing through your body of, oh, that's cool. Yeah, I would put them out in my bookshelves. I'm guessing, though, that the other 89% of us said, what? No way. No way are these visible. They're not going out where anybody can just get their hands on them. I'm in that 89%, by the way. This panics me a little bit. It would give me a little bit of a panic attack to think of my morning page notebooks out on display. My work notebooks? Sure. Quote notebooks? Yep. Old holiday notebooks? Absolutely. Morning page notebooks? Probably not so much. However, I have learned that even when notebooks are out, it doesn't mean your family's going to run and open them. I've had my morning page notebook out on the kitchen table. No one cares. No one cares what I write in it. But just think, you could save them and keep them visible. Number one, that visibility is a reminder of what you already accomplished. Number two, it's a reminder that you want to keep doing it. So maybe you just take your used notebooks and you tuck them into your current bookshelf. You could intersperse them here, there, everywhere so that it's not quite so obvious that you have a collection of old notebooks that people could go through. You could have a shelf just for them and have these little special bookends on either side that denote this, I'm using air quotes, special collection of your library. You could display them Barnes and Noble or independent bookstore style where they are on display, right? Maybe there's a candle next to them. Maybe one is facing out that has a beautiful notebook cover. Again, if you don't care that people look inside, this could be a pretty cool thing to do. So maybe you do this with some of your notebooks that you're okay being out in public, but your morning page notebooks, those are tucked away in that tote bin with that warning/invitation letter. Now, if you do keep them visible, I do recommend that you still date and label your notebooks. Maybe you don't just get out a Sharpie and scrawl it across the front. Maybe you just do it inconspicuously on the spine of the notebook. Maybe you get yourself a special sticker that says property of, the ones that we often put on the inside of our books. You could put that on the outside of a notebook. Maybe you get one of those really cool book stamps that actually make the page kind of 3D, like you could feel the bumpiness of property of Stephanie's bookshelf. You could get one and just tailor it to your notebook. I'll put a link to an Etsy shop that makes these personalized stamps. I think it'd be so cool to have one, not just for our books, but for our notebooks. So some ways so that you could easily see which notebook represents which time of your life. And if you really want to display them nice, you could always reconstruct the cover. You could put a cloth wrapping on it. You could go get your favorite scrapbook paper that you like. Get out the old-fashioned contact paper and put it on there. So when you look at the shelf, yes, it's a notebook, but it's a beautiful reconstructed cover that just blends in so beautifully with the book covers that you have. This keeps these books close to you, so that if you are the kind of person who likes to reread their notebooks or go back and revisit them, you could do so easily. You don't have to dig around in your basement and open the tote bin and then find it with the flashlight on your phone. You could just go to that section of your bookshelf, look at those beautiful covers, look at the date stamped on the spine, pull it out, and enjoy your old writing. So those are two ways to save. Save privately, save on display, sip of coffee time. Number 3 is to upcycle your notebooks. This is one that I'm really excited to play around with. I'm also really terrified that whatever I do won't come out right, but it is not about the outcome. It's about the process. The notebook has already done its job. You can't ruin it. So why not upcycle it and have it bring you another form of wellness and self-care? So when I say upcycle, I mean repurpose your notebook in a creative and constructive way. I've talked previously on the podcast, there is so much research on how important creativity is in our lives. And just one 45-minute session of creativity a month, well, that can lengthen our life by up to 2 years. Creativity and this self-care time matters. So why not take those used notebooks and upcycle them in a creative way? Now, here are a couple of things that I'm thinking of doing with mine, and I'd really love your feedback on this. The first thing you could do is some blackout poetry. So take out an old notebook, open up to any old random page, or if you really want to reflect on a past time of your life, get out the notebook of that time period that you're really looking to reflect on and open up to a specific page. Either way, you have your old notebook open, you are on a page, and you get a black Sharpie. And you get a black Sharpie and you cover everything up that you don't want to see, that doesn't matter. So maybe you look for words that jump out at you as being very critical for you during that time of your life. Keep those visible and black out everything else. If you just did a quick Google search, blackout poetry, you'll see what I mean. It's so creative. It is so cool. So that's one way to take a look at your old pages and reconstruct those pages into blackout poems. Now, another option is to go through those old pages and use them as watercolor backdrops. I love watercoloring. I'm not very good at it. It's the process I love. It just feels really good to spend time with muted colors and paper, and oh, I just love it. So why not take those old notebooks and use them as backdrops? There have been so many times that I have been petrified to start watercoloring on a fresh piece of paper because I don't want to mess it up. I want to get it right. But for some reason, watercoloring on top of a piece of paper that has already been used and benefited from in a really positive way, that doesn't feel as daunting to me. I've already done the work on the page. I've already made that page something wonderful because I've written on it. Why not practice my watercoloring with my beautiful words as a backdrop? What do you think of that? I'm pretty excited to try that one. And, I could reread my writing during that time, or I don't. And I just know that I am layering self-care upon self-care. So that's watercoloring on top of our pages. The other kind of crafting on a used page is to actually do some painting. This is where you're using paint that will actually cover those words completely. Now, there's a whole science to this that we could get into. And I'm crossing my fingers that one day I will be able to get this person on the podcast because I so admire her work. But I learned this technique from Maritza Para. She has a book called Heart Work Journaling. Play with a purpose, soothe your soul, heal the past, and promote self-discovery. And her coaching programs is all about bringing in your artistic creativity as the power to heal. So you do a lot of sketching with stick figures. You do a lot of painting and watercoloring to layer colors on those stick figures to represent emotion. And then the coolest thing is that as you are rewriting the scripts in your brain and you are trying to cultivate a new version of you, you paint over those original drawings and those original emotions that you were feeling and literally create the person and the emotion you want to be in a creative way on the page. I thought this was such a wonderful technique, right? I have said on the podcast a couple of times recently that my new motto around writing is rewrite to rewire. Right? Rewrite that argument so that it went the way you wanted to go. Rewrite the script that you are playing in your head about yourself all the time. This heartwork journaling, painting over your words, creating a beautiful image on the page on top of them is a very similar approach, but with creativity. So maybe you go to a negative place in your notebook and you decide to paint just a beautiful flower scene. And you just cover up that negativity because you're in a new place. Right? Or maybe you just go to a random page and just like with watercoloring, you can't get it wrong because you've already done such good work on the page. You just paint something random. Or maybe you go to those sections of your notebook where you want to rewrite what was written, or you want to represent the growth that you've had since then. And so you paint in a way that mirrors Maritza's approach, which is painting and doodling your way to healing. I will put links to all of those things I've mentioned with Maritza in the show notes, and cross your fingers that I can get her to come onto the podcast and talk about this. Now, lastly, one other option is to just go ahead and cut those pages up. Maybe instead of doing blackout poetry, you go to those places that you like, those lines that you loved, the things that you went, oh my gosh, I wrote this? What a sign of growth. What a sign of positivity. What a mic drop of a quote. I want to remember that. You can go ahead and cut it up, right? It doesn't do any good sitting in the basement. Cut it out. See it in your original handwriting. Maybe you laminate it to protect it and you pop it up on your bulletin board, or you put it where you can see it, right? Maybe you use certain lines, certain letters, you cut them all out and you use them for junk journaling, right? And you have sentences for your junk journaling page, or you have individual words for junk journaling, or really, it could be individual letters that you are cutting out and then recreating something on a new creative page in some sort of paper art fashion. I know there are more ways to upcycle. These are just the ones that are coming to my mind that I think I would be apt to give a try. Tell me which one you love, which one you would try, and if you have any other suggestions for me in the comments of the episode. Okay, so we have talked about 3 things that you could do with your used notebooks if you choose to keep them. Now, let's talk about if you don't want to keep them. You want to let go of them. You do not need those reminders of your past self, of your growth. You can move on. Let's talk about that after a quick sip of coffee. No sponsors on this episode, but we take breaks for coffee. So you've decided you do not need them. That was me. And honestly, like I said, I used to just go to the garbage, pull it out of the cabinet that it was in, drop it in, and close it. I'm so heartbroken over that now. So I want to offer you this. If you don't need your notebooks, if you are ready to move on, I want you to do at least something that really signifies the importance of completing that notebook, the time spent in it, the emotion poured out, the hard work that was put into it. Do something ceremoniously to say goodbye to the notebook. Now, this is typically what most morning pagers recommend. Julia Cameron does not recommend that we save and keep our notebooks. She thinks they are just things that we don't need to hang on to. We are not the person that we were 100 pages ago or not the person that we were 1 page ago. So why hold on to that past version of ourselves? So if that's you, you could do a couple of things. Number one, you could just pop it into the garbage like I did. Number two, you could recycle it. Now, I don't know. I would have to look into this a bit more. I know there are different materials that make up our pages versus our covers. Some of them might have fabric on them. Some of them might have the spiral on the side. So I don't know if everything in our notebook is recyclable. But if you were uncomfortable throwing it away because it is paper, you could look at the elements of your particular notebook that could be recycled and you could pop it in there. You can choose to keep it whole. I don't know why it didn't worry me that people wouldn't find it in the garage. Actually, I probably do because I used to cover up the notebook with like drippy, gross food so that no one would want to put their hands on it if they did find it. Recycling, I don't know. You're just loosely putting that in the recycling bin. That makes me a bit more nervous. But my names are not on my notebook, so I guess it's okay. But maybe you rip it apart. Maybe part of the ceremony before you recycle is to just rip those pages off of the spiral and shred it and say, bye, old version of you. Bye, notebook. Thank you for serving me well, but it is time to move on. And you dump it into the recycling container. Now, if you do want a little bit more ceremony and pomp and circumstance, so to speak, maybe you go to the shredder. Maybe you go to the shredder. If you have one at home, this could be an easy thing to do. Maybe they have one in your workplace, one of those big ones that are available to shred. And you stand there and you feed your notebook a couple of pages of time into that shredder and you watch it. You watch that old version of you just get shredded up. You watch that notebook disappear, not in a bad way, but in a look what I've done. Look how far I've come. I don't need to look back at that old version of me. And I just talked about this recently on the podcast when I was talking with Rebecca Rankin. Now, I am someone who doesn't tend to look back in my notebooks. I really don't want to see that person because I tend to use my notebooks as therapy. And I get out a lot of the negative emotions I have on the page. The positive ones are in my 5-year journal, and those are out in the open and they're wonderful. But if I were to look back at my morning pages, I'm not sure I'd be so happy. I wouldn't try to be in a really good, really good mood anymore. And so I align with Julia Cameron where I choose not to look back at them. But it's interesting because in all other aspects of my life, I do get stuck in the past. I look back at the old pictures and think, oh, wish I could wear that shirt again. Wish my hair was that color again. Oh man, wish my eyes were brighter like that again. I am an eternal looker backer and I don't like it. And so I realized in that episode, I don't do that in my notebooks. Why would I do it in my actual life? And so I really do get the person who ceremoniously wants to stand there and listen to that shredding because you know that that version of you has moved on in a better way. And I have one more way that you could do this, right? We could just stand at the recycle bin or the garbage bin and shred it up with our hands. We could feed it into an electric shredder, but we could do one more thing with it. And I will tell you after a quick sip, we could burn it. We could burn our notebooks. I've got to tell you a funny story. When I was getting my PhD, I had 3 little kids at home. I had a job. I was busy. It was consuming me. This process was not a positive process. Yes, it was hard work, but it just went into a whole nother category of busy work, I would say. And so when I finally finished that dissertation, the day I was done, I surprised my kids. I got them out of school. I believe they were in kindergarten and second grade, or maybe it was first grade and preschool. They were little. I got them out of school as a surprise. We got into the car, had snacks, and we drove down to my college. I handed in that dissertation. We celebrated in the parking lot together. And when we drove home, we started a fire in the fireplace. And one by one, we all took a section of this printed version of my dissertation and we burned it. We burned it as a ceremony of mom did it. We did it. This was a family affair. She's done. We can have her back. She's not locking herself in the office. She's not stressed about all of the things that come with it. And we burned the pages of my dissertation. Now, some of you are thinking, oh my gosh, I can't believe you did that. That's awful. Like I said, don't worry. It wasn't my only copy. But others who have gone through something similar are saying, oh yeah, I totally get it. I burned it. And you could burn your notebooks. You could burn those morning page notebooks or any notebook that you do not feel you have to keep. That's just a different way of ceremoniously letting go and saying goodbye. Now I want to do a little bit of all of these things. So I want your feedback. I want your feedback. What are you doing with your old notebooks? And now that I've given you 4 things to think about, and really 4 things with a couple of different options within each one, what are you thinking about? What might you do with your notebooks? You know me. We've been in conversation for almost 160 episodes. What do you think I should do? I would love to get your feedback. You could go online to alitlife.com, find the show notes for this episode, and leave me a comment. You can reach out at social media on just about every platform. I'm at AffinitoLit. And you know I love that audio tool, so go into your podcast platform, open up that audio link, and send me a quick message. What do you think? What will you try? What should I try? As we alternate between this joyful holiday spirit and burning everything that we don't want anymore. Thank you for listening, everyone, especially if you have stuck to the end through this croaky voice and through all of the coffee sips. I thank you. I love showing up here every week in your podcast platform, talking to you, connecting with you, learning from you. And I look forward to just the last couple of episodes in 2024. Okay, sign off. Go find me online to send me those comments, and let's see how many notebooks we can find in our houses and what we are going to do with them. Thanks for listening, everyone. I will see you next week. Thanks for listening to today's episode of the Get Literate podcast. You'll find links to all the books, resources, and ideas mentioned in the show notes and at alitlife.com. And if you want more, you might like to join my Patreon community. There, you'll find additional inspiration for your reading and writing life, like bonus podcast episodes, book calendars, monthly book clubs, notebooking inspiration, live events, giveaways, and more. It's only $5 a month, and you get instant access to all of the previous content too. Learn more at getliterate.co. And one more thing, if you love what you listened to today, please take a moment to rate and review the podcast, or take a screenshot of the episode and text it to a friend. This helps the podcast grow, and it builds our bookish and notebookish community too. Thanks for listening.